Welcome and good afternoon. I'm Commish Orr, and today I'm going to do something a little different. I thought I would give a review or a brief review on the tabletop baseball game I've been using to run the Baseball Maelstrom, which is my solo league that I have going on right now. And that game is Payoff Pitch Baseball. Payoff Pitch Baseball. So a little bit of background first. I have been playing tabletop baseball games since I was very young. I don't know, maybe 9 or 10. That's a guess. And at that time, it was Stratomatic. I saw my dad was in a league. My mom even joined the league at one point. So I always saw them playing every week, and was really interested in playing myself, and I eventually did. But so that kind of started me down the road of tabletop baseball games. When I was younger, I did play Status Pro a couple of times, and I'm not going to be able to remember the other baseball game that I played. It's the one that has the spinner, and the cards are round, and you put them in and you spin, and the cards are like divided up into pie sections based on what the result should be. Somebody out there, I know the name, but I can't think of it right off the top of my head, but I'm sure somebody out there knows it. And you can drop that in the comments if you'd like. But anyway, so I've been playing Stratomatic off and on since then, so close to 40 years probably, and mostly off more than on, but I've played it every now and then. And that actually was the genesis for an online baseball league using out of the park baseball that a friend of mine, my friend Shannon, Commissioner Dugan, and myself ran for many years, out of the park baseball. Based on the Stratomatic Hall of Fame set, that was kind of what got us started on it. In any event, I was kind of getting the itch to play some tabletop baseball again. I'd been playing off and on, as I said, with Commish Dugan, and so I was kind of curious to see, in the many years since I had played regularly, what else was out there in terms of games. And so I did a lot of research, dug into a lot of different games out there, different possibilities. I had some very specific things that I was looking for. I like lefty righty splits for hitters. I like more realism than statistical realism, I'd say, more so than outright like playability, I guess I would say. So I was looking for something that would be realistic, and I came across Payoff Pitch Baseball during that investigation. It was rising to the top of my list because of its unique play mechanic, which I'll talk about here in a minute. And I noticed that the game was actually, Payoff Pitch Baseball was made by somebody whose name was very familiar to me. It was somebody that had been an owner on in the Baseball Maelstrom out of the park baseball league that we had been running. So once I saw that kind of sealed the deal for me. I knew that I wanted to support a game made by one of our former owners. But also, as I said, it was already kind of near the top of my list anyway. And so I placed an order and received it. And I've now, despite ordering the the box set like this, I actually found that it was better for me to play digitally. And so I have a couple of videos about how to play digitally if you have PDFs of seasons and that kind of thing from any tabletop baseball game, how you can use those and play fully digitally. But in any event, now that I've played 30 plus games in my league, I thought I'd give some initial thoughts on the game Payoff Pitch Baseball. And hopefully, if you're kind of on the fence or you want to know more about it, it can also give you an idea of what you're going to get when you get Payoff Pitch Baseball. It's I'd say it's strengths, weaknesses, and that kind of thing. There aren't very many weaknesses. And again, it's more nitpicky stuff that I'll mention in the video. So the number one thing I think And again, this comes from a background of playing Stratomatic for decades. So in many ways, I'm comparing this to Stratomatic in many cases. I haven't played every tabletop baseball game out there, so I'm sure there will be people that watch this that say, well, this game does this better, whatever. This is just my impressions of Payoff Pitch Baseball, knowing that I have that background in Stratomatic, and I've been playing Payoff Pitch for 30 plus games now, which isn't a lot, but it's enough, I think, to get some first impressions on. So I guess first of all, I want to talk about component quality because that's the first thing you notice when you order a game like this and get it in the mail. And I would say the component quality is pretty amazing. Again, the cards are nice card sized, obviously. Baseball card sized cards if you order the physical copy. And what I like is that they're a thicker card stock. So again, comparing to Stratomatic cards are a little thinner card stock. It's card stock, but it's light. I don't know what the weight is on the cards, but they're pretty lightweight. These cards are pretty a nice thick card stock. So they're going to take I would say take a beating, but they're gonna hold up to regular play pretty well. Everything was packaged great. You get you get nice charts, the instructions, and all of that. The instructions are just on fairly regular paper, but the charts again are a nice, almost laminated cardstock, which I thought was really good. The Stratomatic charts are closer to paper, I guess, and so if you've had Stratomatic, you know that after a period of time, those charts just get kind of beat up a little bit, to the point that I had to I didn't laminate it, but I used packing tape or something to keep them all together. These charts are nice, very thick, even thicker than the cards, I believe. Nice thick card stock that are going to hold up very well to use. And even the manual, I said it's regular paper, but it's actually a very nice quality paper. The rule book is very nice quality paper, better than just normal paper quality, I'd say. A little bit thicker than normal paper. So I thought that was also pretty cool. So right away, components were a big hit for me. But of course, probably the top thing that people are looking for is the mechanics of the game, how it handles different systems, that kind of thing. So I want to talk about that a little bit. So first of all, the basic mechanic for Payoff Pitch, I think, is pretty unique. I haven't seen it with any other games. Not only unique, but pretty innovative, I think, in the way it handles things. I'm not going to tell you how to play the game. I don't think this is really the video for that, but in the process of this, I kind of have to explain it a little bit so you know how the mechanics work. But basically, you roll 2 6-sided dice and percentile dice, 2 10-sided dice, if you will. And the 2 6-sided dice are, you look at a pitcher's card to determine the quality of the pitch, I guess you might say. So the pitcher's card has, and I'll put a card up here so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. But the pitcher, based on the quality of the pitcher, he's going to have different things in the card with different numbers. So obviously a 7 is the most common thing you're going to roll with 2 6-sided dice. So if the pitcher has a tough in the 7 spot, he's going to do better than if he had a patient in the 7 spot. And so a pitcher's card can have tough, patient, in play, and then it has defense, ballpark, and wheelhouse are the primary ones. There are some pitcher's cards that have a little bit modified versions like tough out and that kind of thing. I'm not going to go into detail on that. But what I really love about the system is that it gives you a great mental picture of the kind of pitch that's occurring in that particular at bat. So you can really, it really lends itself to storytelling better, I think, than any other tabletop baseball game that I've seen. Um, if you get a result of tough on the pitcher's card, then you know that the pitcher is really hitting his spots and he's ahead in the count. So there's more likely to be a strikeout, for example, in those cases. And I guess what I should say is you roll a 2d6, you look at the pitcher's card, you get a result, tough in this case, and then you look at the hitter's card, and the hitter's card has different results in different sections that you use the percentage dice to look up. So based on how many times a particular player struck out, walked, or hit doubles, singles, home runs, and that kind of thing, they have a different cross section of results in different sections of the card. So in the tough section, for example, that's where you're going to find your strikeouts, and that's the only place you're going to find your strikeouts on the hitter's card. So somebody like Tony Gwynn, who doesn't strike out that often, has a very low percentage chance, even if you roll a tough on the pitcher's card, of getting that strikeout range. More than likely on a tough, he'll still even battle it out and maybe get a single or something like that. More so than other players that have high strikeout percentages. Patient would be those cases where the pitcher is not quite keeping it in the strike zone. He's trying to work the corners maybe, but he's just outside of the zone, and so he's behind in the count. So that's where the walks are going to show up, and some other singles and other hits are going to show up in the patient section. In play is if in the way I view it is that in play is when the pitchers pitch to contact almost. So they're putting it in the zone, not right in the wheelhouse as the wheelhouse number, but they're getting it in the zone, and the batter is putting the ball in play. So again, they have a good chance of getting hits and that kind of stuff if it's in play. And then the other three, wheelhouse is the other one that's pretty self-explanatory. That means the pitcher has accidentally or whatever left one right in the zone, and so high home run hitters in their wheelhouse section have a huge home run percentage in that section, and that's where all the home runs are going to be, is in that wheelhouse section. Whereas somebody like Ozzie Smith, for example, even if you groove one to Ozzie Smith, his wheelhouse section doesn't have a high home run percentage, but he still has a lot of hits and stuff in that section because it's left in the middle of the plate, for example. And then, of course, the others that I haven't mentioned yet, defense and ballpark. Defense is where you're going to consult the charts to see how the result based on a particular defender, so a second baseman, shortstop, whatever, whoever the defense is testing, and you're going to check for a potential error or base hit based on either the range or the error rating of the fielder in that case. And then ballpark. Ballpark is where whatever ballpark you're playing in comes into play. And so you'll consult the ballpark chart. You'll consult whether it's a right or left-handed hitter. And based on the ballpark dimensions, for example, the percentage dice will tell you whether it's going to be a wheelhouse result or an in-play result, for example. And so, again, even if the pitcher doesn't have a wheelhouse on his card because he doesn't allow very many home runs, he'd still have a ballpark probably on his card. And so there's still a chance that the hitter's going to hit a home run because of the ballpark that the game's being played in. Because they can still get a wheelhouse result that way off the ballpark card. Anyway, so that just kind of gives you a general overview. Again, I think it's the basic mechanic is very unique, and really lends itself to storytelling better than other tabletop games that I've seen, where you roll, you get a result, and you kind of have to imagine what's going on in your head. This one, it's very clear. If you get a wheelhouse result, the pitcher's grooved one in there, and you know that the batter's going to have the advantage in that case. If it's a tough, then you know the pitcher's gotten ahead in the count, and the best that the hitter can do is maybe, hope for maybe a single or something, and fight off an 0-2 count or something like that. So it really lends itself to storytelling. The second area that I want to talk about is base running, because that's a very major area for tabletop baseball games. And I'd say it's there's a way to use basic base running rules, or runner advancement even, or advanced, or that kind of thing based on the way you want to play. If you use the basic rules, then based on the die roll, it'll tell you whether it's a one base, for example, a single is one bases or two bases advancement. Then there are, based on the die rolls, you can come up with a situation where it's your choice on whether you want to try to take that extra base or not. And so when you do take extra bases, that's when the arm of the outfielder, for example, and the running rating of the runner come into play. And unlike Stratomatic, where you come up with a 1 to 20 result that you need to get, where it's you modify the base running of the runner by the outfielder's arm, where the outfielder's arm is really a modifier rather than a flat rating, but it's a modifier. And then there's modifiers for if there's two outs. There's modifiers if it's hit to left field and you're trying to get to third, for example, and that kind of thing. In payoff pitch, it's really the outfielders have a fielding, an arm rating, just like the hitters have a base running rating. And so you're rolling the dice and seeing if you're lower than those numbers to see if there's if he's safe or out when he's trying to take that extra base. So I do like that the base runner's speed and the outfielder arm play into whether they can take that extra base. The only thing that's a little, I guess, missing is there's no like cutoff rules and that kind of thing to try to either cut off the throw to prevent the trail runners from advancing, or throw for trail runners and that kind of thing. It doesn't quite get that in depth for payoff pitch. I know in the super advanced Stratomatic rules, they have rules for if you cut it off, you can let it go, you can cut it off. The team that's batting has the option of trying to take the base or holding, even for the trail runners and that kind of thing. It doesn't really get into that much detail. So payoff pitch doesn't quite have that granularity that Stratomatic has in terms of the cutoff and trail runners and all of that thing. But I still think it's a pretty fun base running system. And there are some homebrews out there if you really want it to be to factor in outfielder arm and player running ratings even more than it is now. The other thing I like, I guess, that I should mention here that is a little bit better than I think Stratomatic even is, in cases where either a runner's trying to take an extra base, there is if you get a result between the runner's run rating and the fielder's arm rating, if it falls in between that range, you roll on a chart and more rare things can happen, such as the fielder can drop the ball or that kind of thing. So it's not just you roll and they're either safe or out. There can be other things that happen during that play, such as the fielder drops the ball, or runner slides in and there could be an injury involved, that kind of thing on those plays. So keeping with the base running, also stolen bases and sacrifice sacrifice hits is something else to mention. And I'd say the stolen base system is just as robust as the is the one that I was familiar with, Stratomatic. Um, there are options based on the pitcher's hold rating, and the base runner's stealing or jump. They have a jump rating and a stolen base rating. So based on the rules you want to use, if you use all of the rules, then you can roll to see if they got the jump first, to see whether they're going to try to take to steal a base or not. And and again, that can be based on the pitcher's hold rating as well, to see if they're held on the base. And then of course, if they try to steal, the catcher's arm comes into play and that kind of thing. So I'd say that system is pretty good to me. Same with there is a system for sacrifice hits, that is pretty interesting. With like stolen bases and sacrifice hits, there are chances for more rare things to happen during those. Like, on a sacrifice hit, there could be a double play, a pop up or something, double play, or the catcher could throw it away, that kind of thing on those in those cases. So that kind of talks about the base running aspect. The other thing that I'll mention, that are maybe a little bit different than the way Stratomatic or some other games might do it, is like pass balls and box. Pass balls and box do not show up on the catcher's card, for example. Catchers don't have a pass ball rating, and pitchers don't have a balk rating. Those are handled through the rare play system that Payoff Pitch has. I know Stratomatic, each catcher has a pass ball rating, and pitchers have balk ratings. And so if a pitcher balked a lot or a catcher allowed a lot of pass balls, then that kind of thing can pop up more. Whereas on Payoff Pitch, they're handled through the rare play system, and the pass balls occur when you're going to roll against the catcher's. Is it error or range? I think it's the error rating. So those fall on the rare play chart, and they're not something that you check for every pitch or every at bat like you do in Stratomatic, for example. On the flip side, each pitcher does have a wild pitch rating, so you can have wild pitches every at bat with runners on base, and those are vary based on how many wild pitches a pitcher really had in real life. So I think that was pretty cool. I guess the last thing I'll talk about here is, before I talk about a couple of things that I think maybe, and I hate to say weaknesses, because I think overall the game is super good, and just the mechanics alone make it something that's really fun to play. But before I get that, I want to talk about solo play and how Payoff Pitch handles solo play better than a lot of other games that I've seen also. One way that it does that is it has an auto steal and auto sack bunt rules. So if you are playing solo, and one of the toughest things is to try to fairly judge when you would steal, when you would be leading off, and that all of that stuff that you would do in other games, where you just kind of have to make that determination. And it always is a little funny, because it's like you have to come up with a rule yourself to try to determine if you're going to always steal with certain players that have a certain stolen base rating and all of that. Payoff Pitch eliminates that worry and has specific rules for auto steal and auto sacrifice hit. In terms of the auto steal rules, there's even a more advanced version of auto steal. So one version, you are rolling and against the jump rating of the runner, and if it's lower, then he's going to try to steal the base automatically, and then you go to the stolen base system in order to resolve that. Whereas if you go to the even more advanced rules, you can factor in not only the jump rating of the runner, but also the hold rating of the pitcher. And you can cross-reference those on a chart to see whether the runner holds, tries to steal, or has a bad jump. he tries to steal with a bad jump. Now, using all of those options, you do end up with, I think, fewer steal chances because you have the extra hurdle of having to overcome the pitcher's hold rating in order to try to steal. Um, the hold rating isn't really factored into the success of the steal. It's factored into whether the steal happens or not, if that makes sense. Um, so in that sense, you're going to have lower steal numbers, I think, or lower attempt numbers. So if you have somebody like Ricky Henderson and he gets on base every time, um, you won't be able to, if you're using all of those rules, you won't be able to just say he's going to try to steal every time he gets on base. Because some of the time, because of the die rules, he may just hold, which again, I think is a little bit more realistic to me, but it is going to lead to fewer steals that way. And then the same thing with sacrifice hits. There is an auto sacrifice hit option. So players have a sacrifice hit numbers on their card. So if you roll the 2d6 to determine the result and they fall in that range, the sacrifice hit range, then you immediately know that the player's trying to bunt the man on over. And I usually play him when it's a guy on first with no outs. I know according to the rules, I think you do it with even one out and men on base. You're supposed to do it, but I only do it with a man on first with no outs. But it's good to know that there's that auto option there, so that you don't have to make those decisions. You can just go according to the way the dice play. The other real huge advantage to solo play is that there is a quick results system. So Payoff Pitch does have a method to determine if you're playing a certain team, if you have a replay going or something like that, and you're playing a certain team, and you're not going to use as the historical wins and losses, the real life wins and losses. There's a system that Payoff Pitch has where you roll dice to determine, based on the winning percentages of the teams with that particular year, to determine the outcome of those games, who won, who lost, that kind of thing. So again, I think as a solo player, that's really a really unique feature. Again, if you're doing the as played lineups and all of that stuff, you're probably not as concerned with that because you may just be using the historical wins and losses from the other teams in that case. Finally, I wanted to talk about a couple areas where I guess, again, and I don't want to call them flaws because they're not really flaws, but just something to keep in mind. One is the injuries seem pretty low to me. So unlike a Stratomatic where there's an injury chance on every player's card, and even the DH, if it's 6-12 on the pitcher's card with the DH batting, there's an injury chance. There's no injury chance on the player's cards in Payoff Pitch. Every player does have an injury rating, but generally speaking, those injuries are the result of either rare plays or runners trying to take an extra base, for example. Now, I always felt like one of the downsides of the Stratomatic injuries was that they were like hit by pitch plus injury, for example. So they only occurred when you had a hit by pitch. You didn't have injuries happen in the normal play of the game, if that makes sense. Like runner slides into second, there's no injury there. So in that regard, I didn't really care for the way Stratomatic did injuries. But that being said, I think the injuries happened in a more realistic percentage of the time, if that makes sense. Because in Payoff Pitch, injuries only happen in rare play cases, and if a runner's trying to take an extra base, then it still has to fall in a certain range, and then you try to see if there's an injury chance. And the injury percentages are so skewed that even if there's an injury chance, if the player has a normal or better injury rating, you still have to roll really high for there to even be an injury. in those cases. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you're somebody, again, if you're an as played player with as played lineups and all of that, then you're not maybe caring that much about the injuries and that kind of thing. But if you are somebody who is using the cards in a different way, a different system, just be aware that injuries aren't going to happen probably as frequently as they would in other games. I've, through the 30 games that I've played so far, I think there's only been one instance where I had a player that was injured, and that was just, I think, one more game. He was injured for one game. So that's, as I said, that's a pretty low injury chance overall. What I've started to do to try to balance it out a little bit is I roll percentage dice for every player in the lineup and the pitcher. And if I roll double zeros, then I roll to see if there's an injury for that player. So maybe in between games he pulled his hamstring or whatever, practice or whatever, there was an injury. So that's what I've kind of been doing to try to balance that out. But as I said, even still, I've only had one injury in 30 games so far, and that injury was only for one game. Now, it could be, I mean, I'm playing with mostly Hall of Famers and that kind of thing, so they're fairly durable. I mean, I think most of them are either normal or durable, so they're going to have lower injury chances anyway because of that, but it's just something to keep in mind. The other thing that I probably will modify a little bit is the pitcher rest system. If you look at the chart for pitcher rest, and again, some of this is due to the fact that the players I'm using are Hall of Famers, and so most of them have great stamina, and so they have a huge amount of stamina. So the rest rules are such that the starters especially can pitch, and then they can come back on. If I'm looking at it the way it is, they can come back on 3 days rest every time, and not, so there would never be a 5-man rotation in this case. So it might be something that I tweak a little bit. So yeah, starters, if they pitch more than 5 innings, but up from 5 to 9 innings, they only have to have 3 days rest in between, for example, unless their stamina is below 7, then they have to have an extra day of rest. It's only if they pitch more than 9 innings that they have to have that extra day, that 4th day of rest. So you're really not going to have 5-man rotations. Again, I'm not playing a modern season, I'll say. So maybe that factors in more with that. So I'll give a little caveat there to what I said. And then the relievers, there's a long relief and a short relief. And so, if it's a short reliever, he can't pitch more than, if he pitches over an inning, he can't pitch in more than 2 consecutive games. Then he needs 2 games of rest after that. The long relievers are in the same situation. They can pitch up to 2 innings, but then if they do it 2 consecutive games, they're going to take 2 days of rest in between. A short reliever can pitch less than an inning in 3 consecutive games, but then he'll need that 2 games of rest afterward also. So I don't know. To me, I don't know. The rest seems a little more skewed than I'd like it. The way they handle pitchers getting tired during the game, I think, is pretty good, actually, on the one hand. So a pitcher has a certain fatigue rating. It's an inning number, so 7, 8, 9. And so if a pitcher has a 7, let's say, then if he pitches into the 7th and he's allowed less than 3 runs, then he's not tired. He can continue to pitch. But if it gets to that fatigue rating, 7 in this case, let's say, and he is allowed 3 or more runs, then he has fatigued that inning. So he'd be fatigued in the 7th. And fatigue pitchers have a lot more chance of allowing wheelhouse results and that kind of stuff based on what you roll on their card. So I like that in the sense that the pitcher has to allow a certain number of runs for them to be fatigued. And also there's a rule in there that says if they've allowed 6 or more runs at any point in the game, they become fatigued right away. So if a pitcher's getting shelled in the second inning, he's allowed 6 runs. Right away, he's fatigued. And that, I think, encourages you to take out pitchers that are in that situation so they don't just continue to get shelled. As I said, the flip side of that is if you have a pitcher that has like a 9 or 8 or 9, he can allow 2 runs and he's going to probably be able to just stay in and pitch a complete game, regardless of the number of hitters he faces. So I do like that in that regard, in the sense that it allows for a pitcher that's getting shelled to become fatigued and you have to remove them. So that I think is pretty cool. Other than, as I said, the rest chart is a little bit, I think I might tweak it a little bit to better suit my needs. But as I said, those are very, very minor things about the game that I think there's a lot of homebrew stuff out there to try to compensate for a little bit of that. And so, but overall, I think the mechanics itself far outweigh those just minor criticisms. I think the game is extremely fun, and especially the rare plays. One of the unique things with the rare plays that I hadn't mentioned before is that, in Stratomatic, you'd have a rare play and it'd be pretty straightforward. In Payoff Pitch, some of the rare plays affect future at-bats. So the rare play may be that the umpire tweaks the strike zone, and then so the next 3 batters are going to have tough results no matter what is rolled. Or vice versa. The strike zone gets tweaked and the next 3 batters are going to have wheelhouse results or something like that. So I think there's a better variety of rare plays, and I haven't come across all of them yet by any means, but they're very interesting stuff. So I'd say as a whole, the game is pretty amazing. I love it. I've had a lot of fun. I'm kind of using it probably not the way it's intended, because I have I've created my own Hall of Fame teams, and so the game's not really intended for that kind of thing, but even so, I've had a lot of fun playing it. And so I'd highly recommend it to anybody that's thinking about it. Just as I said, just the storytelling aspect of the mechanic of rolling on the pitcher's card first, to me is amazing. It always bothered me about Stratomatic, the 50-50 nature of it, that you could have somebody like a Tony Gwynn facing off against somebody that was a high strikeout pitcher. And if you got lucky enough to keep rolling on the pitcher's card, Tony Gwynn's going to strike out way more than he did in real life. Or on the flip side, you could have home runs on the pitcher's card or the hitter's card, and you could have situations where either the pitcher didn't allow that many home runs in real life, but because it's on the batter's card, half the time he's going to allow a lot of home runs. And you're just not going to run into that in Payoff Pitch because of the way the cards are designed. I think that's where I'll leave things. I know I probably spoke way more than I needed to, so I apologize for that, but I'm going to try to use the chapter heading so that you can jump to the spot that you need to in this. But I just wanted to give that overview. I highly recommend the game. You can get either the physical copy, or you can get the PDF, and both of them are great. I have physical copies of 2 seasons, and I have the PDFs of every PDF season there is, because I'm crazy like that. So I highly recommend it. More people need to be playing this. I'm surprised they're not. And I think a lot of people are, but I think more people should be. And so yeah, I highly recommend it. If you have any questions, drop those down in the comments. If you want to follow along with my solo league, I post regular videos, and you can go over to baseballmaelstrom.com to check out the stats from that solo league if you're curious about that. It's completely using Payoff Pitch in that case. And so thanks so much for watching, and drop your questions and comments. And until next time, have a great evening.